making sure that all that information, all that content that the AIM Center sends out is accessible. And there's a link to the recording to her webinar in the digital handout if you would like to watch that. And it's not just devices and materials. It's really important to remember when we're preparing new teachers to teach with accessible educational materials and technologies and assistive technologies that it goes beyond just the device, and it really means a whole process that teachers need to be prepared for, such as identifying a student's need, just like any other type of need may be met, such as a student who may have low reading skills, or a student who may be showing issues related to math, where there needs to be some type of intervention. Teachers need to be aware that accessible technology may meet a student's need and how to identify that need. Matching students to the right tool, the formats, and the features. So this goes to making sure that whatever tool they use aligns with the goals of the student, the content of the curriculum, the tasks they need to achieve, the environments in which they'll be using the technology, supporting the student and the family in the use of it, evaluating the effectiveness over time to ensure that the student is making progress with it, and if not, what needs to be changed, collecting data to that end, and documenting outcomes. So all of this needs to be included. And in much of the literature, often this particular side of accessibility and preparing new teachers isn't always included. Typically, it's more related to the devices and the software program than the process.
There are a number of issues that come up as kids with disabilities are included in the general education curriculum around learning to use the devices and how the devices get purposed for different tasks. Just some examples. It's common for parents to be concerned about a child not being able to do their homework because the device that they might use to access the curriculum in class would be required for homework purposes. And there is specific guidance on this for IEP teams to recommend the use of the same technologies in the home that would require a student to complete homework on an equitable basis. Sometimes a student who is using, like in my case, I do audio-supported reading. I use a 28-inch monitor that blows the text up, but my reading rate is only 150 words a minute. So on top of the magnified print, I also have the speech turned on, so I'm listening. So if I'm very familiar with the material, I'm really flying through up to 400 words per minute. If it's material that I have to do really close reading with, I'm doing less listening and more looking at the magnified print. Now, if I were to be a student traveling to school on a bus and I'm spending a lot of time on the bus or spending a lot of time in an environment that wouldn't support that level of technology, I may need a tablet that would also do the audio-supported reading or just have the audio file. So it's not a particular device and it's not a particular environment. We really need to think about how equal opportunity would play out in the whole life of a child.
We can all see how Richard's teacher candidates are really fortunate to have him as a model user of accessible technology and educator. So excellent point. So the laws and legal issues that come with accessible educational materials, of course, are really important and need to be both appreciated on determining the importance of AIM in the teacher ed curriculum, as well as what teacher candidates need to know. So the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, of course, is already very common in inclusion courses, as Richard was referring to them. Sometimes they're referred to exceptionality courses, and of course IDA is included in special education. The provision that requires state and local education agencies to ensure that printed textbooks and related core instructional materials are provided to learners with print disabilities in specialized formats in a timely manner may not have made its way into your inclusion course or your exceptionality course, but it is a key component of AIM. So this was a provision in the 2004 reauthorization of IDEA, and it's specific to print materials, making sure that students who have print disabilities, as we referred to earlier, could be related to blindness or low vision, physical disabilities, reading disabilities, to make sure that they have the format that they need, whether that be Braille, digital text, audio, large print, and I've lost track of my list there, but there are 4 of them.
And the fourth one would be the digital, or did you miss that? And I think it's the digital that is the most productive, because once it's in a digital form, it can talk to you, it can be magnified, it can access some of the features that Cynthia mentioned earlier, where you can click on a link and immediately you're brought to that store, like the page number or an item in a table of contents.
Malleable, transformable, flexible, digital text. All
those wonderful things that make access, just compared to what it was only a short time ago, access in some ways is no longer the problem. It is really the learning now that we really must deal with.
Right. Which could also happen, the other 3, large print, audio, Braille, digital text are the 4 specialized formats, and the resources in the digital handout regarding AIM in the IDEA. And then, of course, civil rights is an important place to embed accessible educational materials. Section 504 and 508 of the Rehab Act, as well as the Americans with Disabilities Act in Title II, both prohibit discrimination on the basis of disability, and both speak to the obligation of public schools to provide AIM and accessible technologies to learners with disabilities who need them. So both of these laws, the Rehabilitation Act and ADA, have important implications to make sure that that schools are not only serving individual students, but also making appropriate decisions regarding the technologies and materials that they procure, and making sure that they are accessible and have accessible features and meet the Section 508 standards. And again, more information on that is in the digital handout. We're going to move forward with what the relevance of all of this is in teacher education. So some of the findings and challenges of the status of accessible education materials and teacher prep are what Richard is going to talk about next. And I think a lot of this is more specific to assistive technologies than to accessible education materials, simply because there's more available research and information on assistive technology at this point than AIM.
I'm actually looking at my slides in large print here, and so we're looking at that AIM and teacher preparation program makes a difference, and I certainly can attest to that. I use Canvas in my courses these days, and Canvas is a learning management system, and I pull full text articles from our library system into my Canvas course site, and I model for my students how to access these materials using assistive technology. Android application, one of my favorite Android applications is Voice Aloud. It's a free application. You can pay for it without commercials if you want, for a nominal fee. It's incredibly powerful. Also, at my university at Boston College, we have access to Google for, speech for Google support, and we can model in our courses access to Google Apps. We also provide guidance on how to make accessible PowerPoints and accessible Word well. And I think in our we have guidance on that
Right.
here as well.
And I think what the research shows is that when teachers are prepared to use these technologies, that it actually makes a difference to the students in their classrooms. And of course, we know that there's too little aim in teacher education. It's more frequently an elective than it is a requirement. And when it is required, that's most likely to happen in undergraduate special education programs and programs related to moderate and severe disabilities, as opposed to some of the higher incidence. And some of the challenges that create these barriers are obviously lack of faculty expertise. Accessibility is very specialized. There's limited space in the curricula, so there's always competing factors. When you're sitting in a faculty department meeting and people are sort of they're jockeying for their particular interest to be included in the curriculum, and certainly accessibility is one of those topics that need to be jockeyed for. There's a lack of resources in a lot of preparation programs because it does require funding, as well as professional development and ongoing support and maintenance. And the perception that accessibility is only relevant to teaching learners with moderate to severe disabilities, which is very, very inaccurate. Not only students with a range of abilities and disabilities benefit from accessibility, but it really creates a more universal design for learning environment.
And we know so much more about students with severe and profound disabilities having access to the general, at least at the entry level of our curriculum frameworks. That content knowledge is still relevant for our severe population.
So having it included across the program is so important. So some strategies. So we've introduced the why of accessibility. Now it's how. How does it get included in a program? And we've divided this up into two different approaches. There's a light lift strategies and heavy lift strategies. The light lift, these are things that an individual faculty member or at a course level can be executed. But at the same time, it's going to have low programmatic impact. You're probably not going to make huge changes to your program and the outcomes, but there are some things that you can start as early as you may have time to do, which I know is always an issue, that there being time. But if you wanted to take an immediate step to include accessibility in your program, some of the light lift strategies we'll be talking about would be appropriate. Then there are what we call heavy lift strategies. These are a little bit more systemic, require more coordination because they're at the program, the school, or the college level. But at the same time, these heavy lift strategies will result in higher programmatic impact in preparing your teacher candidates for using assistive technology and incorporating accessibility and making decisions both in their curriculum as well as the materials and technologies that they choose. So as we go through these strategies, I wanted to mention that the resources that informed these strategies are both based on experience as well as the literature, and there are a number of articles that we included in the digital handout. They relate to assistive technologies because that's really where the research and the studies have been, but I don't think it's far-fetched to extrapolate our findings, our strategies in the context of accessible educational materials because it's so tied to assistive technology. So for a light lift, if you're looking for something that you as an individual could do on Monday in preparation for perhaps the summer semester or the fall semester, you could add accessibility as a stance, criterion, or for consideration in independent inquiry. So in many teacher education programs, particularly in general education, a stance is required, and the stance is the way a teacher candidate will express what's important to them, what their values are, what their principles are, and having accessibility as a criterion to address if they're doing their stance in the form of a portfolio, for example, that accessibility could be part of those criteria.
And one way to do it, many teacher education programs emphasize teaching for social justice. And teaching for social justice would be a stance that a teacher candidate would take as they enter into inquiring into their practice. But teaching for social justice is kind of a motive. It's a desire. It's an aspiration. But accessibility tied to it would connect more with opportunity. Whether we're talking about students that have different languages, or students with disabilities, or students from different cultural backgrounds, it still comes down to having access, equitable access to the general curriculum. So I think accessibility may be a way to really put teaching for social justice into action.
Great. Digital citizenship as well. I've always advocated for accessibility be included in any digital citizenship curriculum. This particular, an interesting resource in the digital handout for the idea of including accessibility in a stance is based in the new literacy studies. The article that's in the digital handout is by Narayan and Sarabian. Very, very interesting in terms of teacher identity and how assistive technology can be tied to that. Seeking assistance and resources from your state-funded AT centers is another approach. So every state has an Assistive Technology Act project, and all of them are doing something related to AIM in addition to assistive technology. In the digital handout, you'll find a link to finding your own state's Assistive Technology Act project, and you can reach out to them for a consultation and find out what resources are already available within your state that you can tap. Consult with your institution's Disability Services Office. They're right there on campus. As a former coordinator of disability services, I can say it was always a pleasure to collaborate with faculty, whether it was whether or not it meant retrofitting something or being proactive. It was always very productive working with faculty, and it's always helpful when faculty reach out ahead of time and say, you know what, I'm developing this curriculum. I'm considering these materials or this particular technology. What can you tell me about it in terms of its accessibility for students with disabilities? And they'll be quite knowledgeable and a resource right there on campus for you. And you can always enhance your program's inclusion course. And Richard's going to speak to the inclusion course and how it could be enhanced.
Yeah, the inclusion course has had a very rich history in teacher education programs. You may remember some of the early titles were Nature and Needs of Handicapped Children, Working with Special Needs Students, Psychology of Exceptional Children. These all had their own standard textbooks. And the content really focused on the disability of the week, deficit-oriented. These were largely deficit-oriented. And you learned about the nature and needs of disabilities. I don't mean to minimize the importance of any of this, but for their times they were really appropriate. But now there's new demands that kind of stem from this interesting history. So, you know, the original course received a lot of support from the federal government to be extended into the general education teaching community. If during the 60s and 70s students with disabilities were to be progressively mainstream, then general education classroom teachers needed to have some sensitivity to receive these students in their classrooms. It's interesting that the Department of Ed made available what were called Dean's Grants, separate grants to encourage teacher preparation institutions to develop the Disability of the Week course. And all of this was about the early early parts of mainstream. So the course now has really extended into supporting, showing how to co-teach and collaborate, how to develop collaborative relationships with between general ed and special education. Extends into families as partners, extends down to infant toddler programs, early childhood programs, and then it extends up into transition to independent living in the world of work. And then now with the Higher Education Opportunity Act requirements of 2008, all teacher candidates have to be knowledgeable about assistive technology, and they have to be knowledgeable about the 3 principles of universal design for learning. And certainly cultural and linguistic competency is required in the new programs. And all of this is really to prepare both general education and special education for an increasingly for a classroom environment that is fully inclusive.
So an easy light lift may be to look at the syllabus for your departments or programs, inclusion course or exceptionality course, and to see where, in addition, maybe assistive technology is already part of that. If technology is a part of that, how could accessibility be included and assistive technology be embedded within an existing inclusion course. So the heavy lift strategies, and this is a very text-heavy slide, I apologize, but there are, and I want to note that we actually came up with more heavy lift strategies than light lift strategies, but I think they're all practical. I'm not going to go through this particular list right now, but I wanted to put them all in one place. We're going to go through these strategies one by one. And as we go through them, the chat pod has been quiet with questions. We only have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to go through these strategies rather quickly. All of the literature is in the digital handout, but if you want to make comments in the chat pod about, to what extent you think these strategies might work for your particular program, or what particular concerns you might have, because of course we want to continue this as a series for teacher education. So one strategy is to include accessible education materials in existing technology integration models that may be taught within your program's curriculum. So Matt Marino of the University of Central Florida proposed a way to enhance assistive technology by incorporating it in the TPAC model, the Mishra and Kohler Technology Pedagogical Content Knowledge model, where the technology component of that would be both instructional or information technology as well as assistive technology. So not treating, or accessible technology as well. So not including it somewhere else or separating accessible education materials, accessible technology separately in a different course, but to embed it wherever technology is being discussed as part of the curriculum. Of course, general education and special education collaboration is written across the continuum of research and studies as a way to incorporate accessibility materials and technology across the curriculum. May be more easily accomplished in dual or blended certification programs, but there are also opportunities to go across general and special education programs and allow collaboration, opportunities for general ed candidates and special ed candidates to collaborate together, maybe do some mentoring of each other, providing some tutorials or hands-on practice with general education technologies for special educators and accessible materials and technologies by special education candidates for general. Spiraling aim across the curriculum is also very popular as a potential strategy. The article that's in the digital handout that may be helpful with this is by Van Laarhoven and Konderman. Their article is Integrating AT in Special Education Programs. but it means including AIM in the context of whatever the course may be. So if there's a course on media and technology, what is the role of accessibility? In seminar, when a candidate is in the field or is doing an internship, within the seminar, what can be included to support them in planning for accessibility in their lesson plans in their unit? School law, of course, and the legal issues around accessibility. Content methods courses, as a former science teacher, I highly advocate for methods courses to incorporate accessibility in terms of the context of, for example, in science labs, what are the implications for accessibility in making purchases? Choosing materials related to textbooks, websites, any technologies related to learning management systems within content methods courses, all of that needs to incorporate decisions regarding accessibility. All right, an AIM station. So having a place on campus where teacher candidates can go and practice. This could be, depending on the scale that you can or want to go, an AIM station could be something that's a standalone that includes assistive technology, examples of accessible materials, tools to convert print materials into specialized formats. So it could be a large lab that has a variety of stations, or it could be at a smaller scale and something added to an existing computer lab. But something that is a start toward giving teacher candidates some hands-on practice, which we know makes a difference to them when they start practicing in classrooms, that they've had that hands-on experience in that practice. An AIM partnership. So teacher education programs can certainly reach out to child development centers and to K-12 schools in order to find out, okay, where out there, in what centers and what schools are AIM and accessible technologies being used. So where may be these pockets of expertise? Are there schools out there that have experts in the form of assistive technology practitioners or technology integrators that have taken a great interest in universal design for learning that teacher education programs can partner with and give all of their teacher candidates an opportunity to provide some observation, to get into some classrooms and either be participants if there's not an opportunity to actually do a field placement or an internship with these schools. To what extent can teacher candidates take advantage of having this regional or local resource that they can use to develop their knowledge and skills in accessibility? Providing AIM across disciplines. So this is known as Transdisciplinary Education, and many teacher education programs may not be doing this, but a lot of universities in the health field have started this transdisciplinary initiatives where programs across departments are collaborating. So physical therapists, occupational therapists, students in medical programs, nurses, speech and language pathologists are all working together to learn how that they can collaborate in order to serve patients. There's no reason that teacher education can't do the same thing and extend this out to accessible education materials and technology. So in some cases, they're termed transdisciplinary playgrounds or interprofessional programs, but making it a wider initiative across the university. That's heavy lift for sure, but a strategy. Having an advisory group, of course, so can your program identify experts in the field, families, AIM users, school personnel that they could bring in and hold a series of meetings, perhaps provide some food, because food we know will attract a lot of people. So hosting dinner meetings where these experts can come in and provide some consultation to inform any improvements in the area of AIM to your program. Faculty course release. So this could be an opportunity for an interested faculty member to take some time in order to look at either the whole program and figure out how AIM could be integrated across, or they could begin the course release to develop a new course. There is also even the suggestion that maybe there could be a sabbatical, and that was provided or offered up by Judge and Sims. So beyond a course release, a sabbatical is also a possible strategy. Graduate students as AIM mentors. I love this particular image. It's of a couple of skydivers. So they're in tandem. So sometimes I think for some faculty that's what this can feel like when you have a graduate student who is trained in AIM, providing some support to improve the faculty member's knowledge and skills in the area of AIM, either in the classroom or helping to inform a curriculum revision. So that actually was suggested not in the area of AIM, but in technology in general by an article by Smith on graduate student mentors for technology success at Bowling Green. And I think we're at 3 o'clock, and I'm afraid I'm really sorry that we've run out of time, but I don't want to hold anybody up. So we'll take just a couple of minutes to wrap up, but I want you to know that we realize the time. Go ahead, Richard.
Well, just to encourage you to read one of the resources identified. It's Promises to Keep. It's a paper jointly published by the Cedar Center from the University of Florida and the Chiefs, the Council of Chief School Officers. And it really is a promise to keep us moving ahead with inclusive education so that all teachers will be teaching all students. But by that I mean elementary and secondary teachers will have students with disabilities in their room, and they will have shared responsibility with special education to get this done. And that students' progress will be monitored through school, through assessment, and that instruction will be targeted through tiered systems of support. So my own throw my own 2 cents into this. I've made a bold prediction that by 2020, classrooms as we've known them for 150 years are going to disappear. And my dream is that that schools will be far more inclusive and more flexible and able to accommodate a much broader range of students. And all of it will be because of these great accomplishments from universal design, the work of the AIM Center, and how we progress with developing a really solid teacher corps.
And then, as Richard said, that the CEDAR report is in the digital handout. A few resources to point you to, of course, is the handout for today. The center's website, of course, at aim.cast.org. There's a particular page on the website that's dedicated to teacher educators. And over time, with webinars like this and going into detail on support for teacher education programs, we'll be building the resources that are available on this page. There's also the UDL on campus site that's on Universal Design for Learning in Higher Education. And it just so happens that on January 24th, there's going to be a webinar. Our own Lynn McCormick and Sam Johnston will be giving this webinar the tour of Universal Design for Learning and Accessible Education Material Resources for Improving Post-Secondary Learner Outcomes. So mark your calendars. That's Tuesday, January 24th, the same time as today's webinar, 2 to 3 p.m.
And that will be really relevant to teacher education because it will really show how your universities can model accessibility systemically at your universities.
And of course, stay in touch with the AIM Center. Our website again is AIM, that's aem.cast.org. You can follow us across numerous social media services. Those links are available at our website if you'd like to follow us on Twitter or like us on Facebook and go to our website. You can contact us Both Richard's and my email addresses are also in the digital handout, and you can access the AIM Center as a team at aim@cast.org. And finally, we want to thank you for coming today. So much more information than we are able to spend sufficient time on. But we hope that this webinar gave you some ideas and that you may want to reach out to us to explore a little bit more deeply. Please take a few moments to complete a brief survey. This helps us to gather information on how to continuously improve our webinars and where to go with our technical assistance and resources. Your responses are completely confidential, so please don't fear that your name is going to be sold or any places. It's strictly to support our technical assistance. Richard, any parting words?
No, thank you all for joining us today. And it was a pleasure working with Cynthia, and a lot of resources to check out, and I'll do a better job next time.
That's great, Richard. Your experience is invaluable. Thank you. So Leslie has posted the link to the webinar in the chat pod. It's also going to pop up when we close out the Adobe Connect room, but you'll also find it in the digital handout as well. So multiple ways that you can make sure you give us some feedback. Thank you so much.